Hello, my friend.
How's things?
Things are good. Things are heating up.
Yeah, okay, winter's coming to an end. So in New Zealand, a common greeting in indigenous language, Maori, is kia ora, which is very similar to Tahitian, actually, curiously, which is io orana. Anyway, kia ora literally means have life.
I love that. That's
Order is life.
awesome.
Life, so life force thing. So it's a beautiful greeting. Yeah.
I
So,
love that. At some point, we should actually like really talk about what some of those ancient beliefs are and like how advanced they were and how over a period of time we just discarded them. And now we're going back to try to understand, like, wait, that was really
yeah, there's a
helpful.
couple of points in there. So we are planning to talk about acting out of fear or acting out of inspiration today, and acting from inspiration rather than urges to control conditions, and what the difference is and why it matters. But you raise a very good point because, I've been exploring for a long time the same concept from different angles. And the concept is the origin of source or consciousness or all that is, or the God force, or whatever you want to call it. Also, the origin of the universe in terms of the Big Bang and the scientific concept. And I've always been fascinated by the indigenous creation story, the creation myth of our Maori people here in New Zealand, which is the story of Rangi and Papa, Rangi being the sky father and Papa being the earth mother. And to me, they were just different facets of how I understand this whole thing. And so what we're now given to understand, there's a thing I thought, which was not actually all that helpful, which was that the nature of source consciousness or the universe or all that is, all I had as a model was the Christian God, right? And the Christian God knows everything and is infinite and da 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 da, no beginning and no end. But it would appear that that is not necessarily, blasphemy here to some, not necessarily the nature of the universe. It's a human approximation because it suits us to think of such a thing. So it appears that somehow at some point consciousness existed, and Seth and Joshua both talk about this, and Joshua especially when prompted or asked by me, but Seth talks about it too, going way, way, way back. So, and at some point this consciousness existed, and the consciousness said, who am I? And then the next thought in an instant was, who asked that question? And at that moment was the creation of the entire universe and the Big Bang, if you like, or the separation of Rangi and Papa in the creation story. And light came in, which is the creation story of Māoridom, like their children prized them apart to let light come into the world. And the god of the forest, Tane Mahuta, he lay on his back and he pushed up and push them apart. And so his legs are metaphorical tree trunks, you see, which is why he's the god of the forest, Tane Mahuta. So at that point, light entered and consciousness changed. And so it's the God that knew everything and had no beginning and no end. Does not appear to tally with these other teachings. So at some point, consciousness arrived, and in order to understand itself, the physical universe and the human experience was created. And the second thing I wanted to say about that is I was thinking the other day about science and religion. And a lot of people have said, well, religion existed to explain the stuff that people couldn't understand in the pre-scientific era. And then as science has kind of ticked off various boxes, the need for religion has diminished. So that's one way to look at the thing. But I had a different metaphor, which is that this is the game of life or the game of the universe. And scientists have correctly observed that some things are measurable and predictable using mathematics and geometry and so on. Right? We've talked about geometry recently. And it is true that within the physical realm, mathematical models, physics, geometry, do predict accurate. They measure, describe, and predict various phenomena that are happening in the universe, right? But the metaphor for me is not that science is eventually going to explain the entire God thing, but rather that scientists have managed to start to understand some of the small parts of the game of life or the game of the universe, but they have no friggin' idea what the game is or even that it is a game. So in other words, if you've got a board game, these guys have really analyzed the first square or the first row or whatever, out of many, many rows or squares, but they actually don't understand the bigger picture as to what the game is. So that is a different way of saying that science is explaining away everything that was previously a religious belief, because I'm not sure that science can ever get to where this all needs to get to. And the last thing I want to say about science is that it would appear that Einstein, among many others, but Einstein in particular, and I'm fascinated by relativity and E equals mc squared and all that stuff. I don't want to talk about it here today though, but it would appear that he received that information as inspirations, and without any kind of obvious rational or deductive or scientific process, that these ideas came to him in what the way that you and I would call inspiration, which takes us back to what we wanted to talk about to start with, which is inspiration and fear, acting on urges versus fear. So I'll stop here and tell us where you want to go with this, or comment on anything I said. You have the floor.
That was an impressive intro. I like that. You just circumvented everything. I love it.
You know what? That circled back to the beginning part. That just came to me right at the end. That wasn't intentional. In other words, I was kind of talking in flow, and it was just coming out like I wasn't consciously planning, which is interesting, because if I consciously plan to describe something, it never works, and I make a list of all things I want to say and I forget half of them. And whereas I actually said all things I wanted to say, and more kept coming to me. As so, in other words, I was in a state of flow or inspiration when I did that. I wouldn't say I was channeling necessarily, which is slightly different, but it is what happens when I do automatic writing, you might say, where I start writing and ask for inspiration and it comes. But I said I was going to stop talking, so
no, this is
cello, as they say in Hindi. There you go. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's right on, and I think it's. I mean, the last 2 weeks, I have really dove, whatever the correct terminology is, into this concept, which you just sort of really brilliantly sort of segued us into. Is it does truly connect with conversation and flow, right? Because we are talking about taking action on inspiration, and then, pushing past that fear or that uncomfortable moment. And when you really get back to the basics of inspiration, I think you just described it beautifully. You didn't plan on what you were saying, but you were in a flow. You felt this vibrational connection, and you attracted this beautiful introduction, and boom, there it was. That's taking action on inspiration. You listened, and then you let it flow.
Yeah, none of that was planned whatsoever, right? Not a single word of that was planned. All that I planned was because we watched that 5 minutes before, and I said, what do you want to talk about? And you said fear and inspiration. I said, sounds great. And that was it. That was the entire plan, fear and inspiration. So here we are. So
right. So think about that for a second, right? I mean, because your intro really was well thought out. It seemed to me scripted and planned. That's how to somebody listening to it, really well thought out, and how you came full circle. But you took action on that inspiration. We don't give each other enough credit, right, for that act of inspiration. We think every conversation, now this is not true, right? We know it's not true, but we think, oh, it's just scripted. Like, you don't think, well, I'm going to go into this conversation, I have no idea what I'm going to say, but I'm going to attract all the right words and the right flow, and it's just going to happen. When we have to go speak, we get nervous, right? It was like, oh my God, what about, we try to script it out, we try to do, but that's not the way to do it. Like, so the way you just naturally flowed.
Both of us would have had that would exemplify that. One would be sometimes in business meetings or in sales situations that suddenly you feel like you're on your game and the words just flow and everybody in the room is in sync with you and you close the deal and it feels amazing. And you can comment on that in a sec. But another thing that I've found from sports, like my best sport was running, like 800 and 1500 meters. But in sport, there was some days, I played a lot of soccer too. There were some days where everything just worked and it was in flow, and it was just, it's a magical feeling in sport, isn't it? When you do something like you're, heading to the tape at the end of a race, or you do something in soccer and it really works. And I know you've played a lot of sport, and at those moments, I never realized why they were so deeply satisfying or sublime, but it's really because you're in flow and you've turned off the conscious mind and you're letting your greater wisdom run the show. So tell me about your thoughts about this in business situations or sport.
So I think you just said it beautifully. It doesn't make a difference in the situation. You're out on a first date, you're out in a business interview, right? you beautifully set this up to where you feel good, you have confidence, you believe in yourself. I heard this term this week. You know, we've all heard this term, fake it till you make it, right? You know, there was a TED talk on it. And it's really not fake it till you make it. Fake it till you make it is an interesting concept, but it's really believe it till you become it. That's really
Yeah.
what it is, right? You got to believe in yourself. You got to believe it till you become it. And it starts with believing in what's in yourself and in inspiration. When you're able to let that flow happen and you're able to embrace it, no matter where you are, in a sports setting, in a business setting, in a personal setting, great things happen. Like amazing things happen, right? And anybody listening to this can go, I've been there. No matter what situation, right? I've been there. But do we give it credit where it's due, where it's it's universal inspiration that
Yeah. I've actually had
that's
the
a
same thing in public exams, like when I was at school, I just realized. And I had it once in an English exam, and I wrote this essay, and I got 87 in that exam. And then I had it when I did geography the first time, and I was 17, and I got really excited about two topics. I'm really interested in them, and I got 89 for that. And I realized that the study I did for the geography was in flow. I enjoyed the exam and expressing myself. And then I realized now when I was 15 and I got 87 for that English exam, it was that I just wrote an assignment, an essay that just came to me. It was nothing planned. I'd never thought about this, but I recounted something that had happened with some friends. And I guess because of the energy behind it, it worked. You know, the new way of doing things in business is to actually be authentic, right? To be your authentic self and to be in flow. The old way, and this is kind of a standard business joke, that the old way is like, if you can convey authenticity and trust, you know, that's the secret. And if you can fake that, you've got it made.
That's true, no question.
That's the old way, right?
I
To
know
pretend you are these things. And you know, you and I have both been surrounded by business people who fake all that authenticity and trust, and actually they're snakes in the grass or whatever.
You know, it's all true. So when you start thinking about inspiration, where it comes from, what it is, right? Well, what is inspiration? What does it feel like? What does it sound like? What are the words, right?
Yes.
And then you understand, like, well, what fears pop up? And I've really been thinking a lot this week, the last couple of weeks on this, and I kind of feel myself in a very big way taking more inspired action. So let's take a moment, and maybe you and I can just sort of riff on the concept of what is inspired action and where do you hear it? Where does it come from, right?
Yeah, and
So
also
for
what is
me,
an urge, right? Like, how do you know if you're acting on an urge to control conditions? Why is it different and why
really
is it better?
important.
Yeah.
Wow,
So
that's a really important
should we tick
distinction.
that
Thank
off
you.
before we head into inspiration? That so the
Yes.
idea is that if you accept the concept that we just happened to start talking about in a world of no coincidences, which is that if you can get into flow and let the inspiration come from your greater wisdom, your inner self, or whatever you want to call that, or source or the universe. So if you get into that, then you know you're in sync, and that's a wonderful state. So a lot of people don't understand the concept of flow, for example. Now, you can only get into that if you actually allow this thing to come through you. But if you try and control it, like when I make a list of things I want to say, it comes across as wooden and stilted. And I half the time, even when I got a list, I never get through them all. So the point is that when you have an urge to control conditions, that actually is at the other end of the spectrum. It's the opposite of being in flow or receiving inspiration and acting on inspiration. So the idea is that the old way that we've all done things is that we want to control conditions, and we have an urge which comes out of fear to control conditions. Like, let's say I looked at my business cash flow and I could see that the next week or two was going to be difficult. I have a bit of a panic attack. I feel anxious, and I think, right, who can I hurry up to get them to pay their bills? What can I do now to make that happen? And the other way to do it, which is quite hard to do, would be to think about the current situation, see if any inspirations or ideas come to you, send love and kind thoughts and, you know, blah, blah to everyone who owes you money right now. And also think what opportunities could come my way, and then let the opportunities flow to you. So that actually happened this week, and quite specifically, not worrying about the cash flow, but I kind of magicked out of thin air a whole lot of new opportunities.
Well, talk about that a little more. So what was your process in creating that? I mean, was it meditation? Was it 15 minutes a day of just what?
No, it just flows to me. Like I used to meditate a lot. I'm not finding meditation as a great tool for me at the moment, which, it's meant to be part of what we're doing every day, but it's worked brilliantly in the past. But I just find that I can just click the tiny switch in my head in the middle of anything and receive inspiration. So the inspiration seems to come to me, and I know how to connect with that. I used to have a picture of my grandfather, my father's father, who died before I was born and was a very clever man. I used to have a picture of him guiding me in business stuff. I don't have that picture anymore, but I do feel like I received guidance. But so 3 or 4 years ago, I had a deadline to create this online course, which is called Traffic Lab. It's in our Prosperity Lab website, and it's DIY online marketing. And I had a deadline and a price, and I was on a course, and you had to kind of get to mission accomplished by the end of the 12-week course, whatever it was. And I realized now that I was kind of trying to make this happen, and it was so much effort and energy, and Trace and I ended up exhausted from doing it. She made the stuff, I wrote it and spoke it, and she put it all together, on the website and blah blah. And it's a very good product. Like, I'm revamping it now, and it's really, really good. But it was all based on what I wanted, and what I thought people should know. And whereas now I'm looking at it from the other point of view, and I'm saying, I know a lot of stuff about online marketing and course creation and all that sort of stuff. What do people really need? What are their sticking points or their blockages? How can I help them get past those with what I know? And so we've got this website, International Coach Registry, and I thought, right, I'll make a personal branding course, which came to me through inspiration, this thing, and I'll make that a bonus, that if you buy a listing on the course, you get this bonus personal branding course. But as I started making the personal branding course, it became much bigger. It became about how to craft your message, how to hone your offer into something that people want, what kind of marketing is right for your kind of business, the stage you're at, and also whether you like writing or video or whatever it might be. So it's actually like now a coach's toolkit to actually start or expand their business. That's what this course became. But I still pictured it as a bonus that I would give away as part of this listing. But then I talked to a few people I know who are coaches, and the listing, there was no energy around that. But as soon as I mentioned personal branding, even before I said how much extra was in it, their ears picked up and they said, yeah, I want that. And yeah, I'll pay that. And so I thought, oh, hold on. Go with, where the energy is, right? So I believe that the listing is a good thing for them to have, but the entry point is going to be this course. So the course actually came out of nowhere except an idea, and I'm about to make it now. So by not resisting and not trying to hammer home, no, I want to sell the listing and this is a bonus to make people buy the listing or encourage them or incentivize them, it's like, hold on, go with the least resistance, right? Go with the flow, ski downhill, not uphill. So it's like, yeah, you go with the flow of the stream, it's in the canoe or kayak or whatever it is. It's like, yeah, people actually really, really want this thing, even though I've hardly described it. It's got a lot of energy around it. So I have no idea where it's going to go, but I'm just going to do it, and I'm going to make that course the best I can. And all the things that people are always asking me about, all the blockages, like when I talk to coaches, it's like, yes, but blah, blah. And I say, no, the way you solve that is you do this and you do that. And I know all this stuff, and it's all in there. It's like the most dynamite product I've ever made. And it all came from inspiration. Does that, it's a bit sort of practical, but does it kind of convey inspiration to you when I say that?
So I think what people ask, I know when people ask me, like, well, so I think we're looking for a more tangible description of what inspiration is. So is inspiration an idea you didn't plan on, a thought you didn't plan on, a new idea, a different thought? So for example, when I'm usually what I like to do, you see, I'm starting to do all these little videos, right? And all these little, they call them reels, right, on social media. And
TikTok,
I'll do,
yeah.
right.
Yeah.
And I'm doing them on Instagram now. I don't know if you noticed, but I'm tagging you. I know you on Instagram.
Yeah.
I'm tagging. You'll see. I did a couple things with you in there that your ideas. I tagged you. And
okay, I'll make a note of that. I'll check that out.
Yeah. So if you look in your Instagram, go on the top, in the top right, you'll see a little circle with either like it's a number after it. Click on that. It'll show you where you've been tagged.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so on
So
TikTok, you what's your handle with Jerry Kidd, isn't it?
at Jerry Kidd, right? And on and
JERRYKIDD. Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
And on
So it starts off
Instagram,
with some nice Italian meatball recipes and then moves
yeah.
into what you might call spiritual stuff. Yeah.
Right. So what I find is I'll do these, and you try to do these little videos under a minute, right? I started doing them. I would send them to my daughter, right? In college, we talked about this, and I just started to do them and have fun. But you start talking about a concept. All of a sudden, I'm going to say I'm going to talk about fear and inspiration. All of a sudden, I have this. I'm just talking about it, and what I had not thought about just comes out. I'm like, holy cow, that was a great idea. When I was talking about sort of it's we always talk about it's an inside job, right? It starts within you. And I started talking in this one point in a little video, and I said, hey, there's two different types of resumes in this world. There's a physical resume and then there's an inner resume. I didn't plan on that. I didn't even think about that
Oh,
concept.
I heard that actually. Yeah. So that
Right,
just came to you. Yeah.
it came to me, and that
Right.
is, and we all have that, but we don't know how to classify it. We're like, wow, that was just
Yeah.
strange, right? Or what a cool thought. Like, well, no, that's what I want. I want people to understand that they already are receiving inspiration and they're already acting on inspiration, right? So the idea is to be aware of it and then to sort of engage with it a little bit more, just like you just told that beautiful story, how this idea popped in your head. You kept following it, almost like a little scavenger hunt of these little
Yeah.
ideas, and you just kept following it, right? One after the other until it came to something that was bigger.
Yeah. So your example that you gave of the resume thing, yeah, that's interesting that that just popped into your head because I assumed that this was something you thought, right, I'm going to talk about this. But the unscripted certainly has a lot of power and it does convey authenticity if you are in that flow, you can get into that channel. So did you think we described adequately about acting out of fear? Well, there's two parts to the fear. One part is that if you have a fear, then you feel an urge to control the conditions to get rid of that fear by taking some action versus trusting that your greater wisdom will provide you with a solution, not feeling the fear. Because as they say, there are two kinds of fear. There's fear that's rational and fear that's irrational. And rational fear is something that could cause you physical harm or kill you. So get out of the way. The bus on the sidewalk, like get on the sidewalk off the road. There's a bus coming. So that fear is rational, but pretty much every other fear you can imagine is merely a thought and it's irrational. And it's, if you can understand it's merely a thought, then everything changes. So we are trying to say, well, is it possible to act purely out of inspiration and not out of fear to control the conditions? And if you actually did a really honest analysis, which you probably have, one was to do an honest analysis of all the things we've tried to do and control in our lives, we might pretend or kid ourselves that it worked, but generally it doesn't. And most of the really good things that happen seem to not come out of planning or of control or anything else. They seem to just arrive. And the way most interesting business deals unfold is mostly, for me anyway, almost completely unexpected and unplanned. And you may have your soil tilled and ready to receive the seed and to nurture it, but the seed arrives, wind blowing seed arrives, and the thing starts to grow, whatever. So that's really the key concept. But it is actually quite hard at times to differentiate between an urge and an inspiration. And we want to be acting on inspiration, not on urges or the fear about controlling conditions. Do you want to talk about how you can differentiate between an urge and an inspiration?
Yeah, and I think what you just said was dead on. So, I think the idea of this inspiration, which we both just talked about, it's these fun ideas that come to you, that it's the way flow happens. It's the way these things happen naturally. They are extensions of your life that are going to improve them. They come when you're feeling good, right? When you feel good, if you're meditating, if you have a thought that pops in your mind when you're meditating, you're aligned, right? You're more aligned then than you are when you're not. So those are inspiration. Now we all have things that happen to, my daughter's going to drive 4 hours. I don't want her driving. I'm going to take her car in. I'm going to get it looked at. I'm going to get the tires replaced. I'm going to change everything I possibly can. I'm going to react out of this fear on all these urges to make sure I can control the condition, right? So one is, like you're saying, I'm building a course and all of a sudden it said do this, and I'm like, okay, let me see how that happens, right? And the other is these ideas that pop out pop in your head on fear, where you want to change and control or protect, right? You don't want something that you fear might happen, right? And once again, it's based upon what's your limiting beliefs in your mind, right? So those urges, my daughter says, I want to come home Dad, I'm going to be home at midnight. My urge is, you'll be home at 10. And it's like, okay, don't, these are, what would be the difference between 10 and midnight? Okay. It's totally my fear. There is no rationale behind it. It's just, I want to control her. I want to control the situation. I want it done on my time without any real, essence behind it besides control. So that for me are the two, how I distinguish those, right? One, inspiration, it comes to me when I'm feeling good. Like, it comes naturally.
Yeah.
There's no
Right.
effort to it. And the other
Yep.
is an emotional buildup, a negative connotation to it. I
Right.
want to control. I want people to listen, and that's important to me. And you do what I tell you to do, right? And that ends up blowing up in your face anyway.
That's very good. And so you're saying that when you're feeling good, that is the mindset or the feeling that you have that allows inspiration to arrive.
You called it flow. Is it really a difference,
Oh
right? I
yeah,
mean, it's the
yeah,
same, kind of the
right.
same thing.
So that feeling good, we also sometimes talk about as being in alignment. And being in alignment or feeling good is the situation where you and your inner self have the same point of view, or an agreement or alignment about something. And when you're feeling bad or a negative emotion, then the emotional guidance system is saying, beep, beep, beep. You and your inner self have a difference of opinion here, and it feels very unpleasant as you stretch that and pull that. It hurts, and that's why you feel negative emotion. So many people have different models as to what emotion is, but I found this to be the most useful model by far, the emotional guidance system, which says a negative emotion means you're out of alignment, you're seeing things differently from your inner self. A positive emotion you feel when you're in alignment, and you and your inner self are completely in sync and seeing it the same way. And it gets a little bit hard to understand that when you want to unpack joyous events. Like you see your daughter, when she comes home from college, and you feel great joy and love, and you know that at a different level, that's actually because you and your inner self are in full agreement. I'm not quite sure what you're in full agreement about, but I guess if you look at a situation and then suddenly a situation that worried you, and you spin it around and look at it from the other point of view, then you can say, well, that feels really good, and I know I must be in sync with my inner self or my greater wisdom.
Well, what I think is really interesting, Rob, and this last couple of weeks, the way in the course that we're taking, the Ascension program, in this fear segment, right? The thing the aspect about all of our lives that really came, I think, that I became aware of like a ton of bricks, was we take so much action in fear and so much action on those urges, yet we discard so much inspiration. And the urges and the fear bring us so much more fear, and the inspiration brings us so much more love. But we find ourselves, like, if you get angry, I mean, I can remember as a kid, right? You get angry, you're like, I'm going to punch the wall. Well, that's an urge, right? To control a
Yeah.
condition, to do something. And we so easily go and we punch that wall, right? Now, the urge to, reach out to that person, to ask somebody out on a date, to make a phone call, to send your resume, to make that sales call, we so quickly find excuses, right? And that's where the next phase is, right? How do we push past fear, or disguised as these excuses, right? I don't have enough time, I'm not smart enough, I don't have enough skills, I don't have enough money, right? I wasn't born this way, I shouldn't be able to do that, whatever those may be. But we're so quick to act on that urge to control the situation. It's almost been pre-approved by society. It's okay that you ran out after that person screaming, yeah, but it's not okay that you lifted up a phone to try to reach out to somebody you haven't spoke to in a year or 2 years, or you said something on social media that you were inspired to say, that people said, that's not you. I had somebody say to me, you're not you don't seem the same person you were 20 years ago. And I'm like, God, I hope not.
Yeah.
Yeah. At some point, our experiences and our knowledge have to expand us to some goal, to some destination, right? And if you think about how you get there, and if all you're doing is acting on urges, and to explode, and I use the word explode because it's not even acting, those urges are explosions of emotion because you're doing it so quickly and so aggressively, right? Even if you're doing it calmly and you're not physically in an altercation, the amount of energy that bursts out of you to quickly take that action versus inspired action, you're like, nah, maybe not. One's going to help you, one's going to hurt you. But we are all so quick to not hurt us. One's going to take us in a different direction, right? It's in a rinse and repeat cycle of fear. And one's going to take us into sort of this, and as Joshua calls it, right? Fear is the checkpoint of life. It's once you push past that fear, you get past those pearly gates, you get to experience aspects and destinations in life that you never thought possible. You couldn't dream of.
So on that topic, the one of the homeworks we were doing this week, I'm going to describe it because people might want to attempt it, because I found it surprisingly powerful and very interesting. So the first thing was list all the desires you can think of, and there was space for 12. So think of 12 things you want, like a better house, or to get a different job, or find work you love, or to lose weight, or whatever it might be. So you list things you desire, right? And then break them into two categories. The first category is true desires, which is stuff which is aligned with your inner self, and then false desires, which is based in lack. So if you're saying I want a better house, well, that would be a desire based in lack. So it's a valid desire to want a better house, but it's not actually a true desire, because a true desire would be more along the lines of to love the place I'm living, and to explore and expand living in beautiful places, that resonate with me, and that people, friends and family, want to come and visit and stay, or whatever it might be. So that's a bit of an example. So then you've got a list of true desires and a list of false desires, which may take a little thought, but you'll get there. And then the next thing was to ask for inspiration about one thing you can do to move towards that particular desire. So that was, in terms of the true desires, that's a kind of a reasonably standard sort of an exercise to ask for inspiration on a true desire. And so you open yourself up and let the thoughts come in, whether it's a meditation or however you want to receive wisdom, your inner self, or the voice, or whatever you want to call it. And so I wrote down these various things, and I wrote down inspirations that came. But then it was very interesting, because the next part was do the same thing with false desires. So ask for inspiration and write down one thing you can do for the false desires. So, and then for the house thing, I said, stop worrying about it, focus on the feeling of it, appreciate my house as it is. It is perfect as it is. And so it was that, to actually reframe the thing out of lack into appreciating the abundance that I have, and really wanting to amplify the feelings, the good feelings I have around it, because if I have those feelings, I'll attract more of them. Because the point of focus, that's the nature of the essential nature of the law of attraction. So that was pretty good. And then the last part was what you were talking about, which is the fear. So you've got your list of, say, 6 or whatever true desires and 6 or whatever number of false desires. And then you write down next to each, well, what is the fear that pops up and prevents you from taking that next step? And I did all of that as well, and then write down the intensity of the fear on a scale of 1 to 10. So this was an incredible exercise, and I found that the false desires kind of morphed into true actions. In other words, the nature of the false desire kind of vanished a little bit, and really it became an exercise where the fears stopping me from doing true desires or false desires, it became super apparent, and it laid bare all the things that are stopping me. For example, to make some big changes in my business that I've been thinking about for 4 or 5 years. And it's like, why haven't I really done this? Why am I still doing more of the stuff I'd rather not be doing, and not as much of the stuff I would rather be doing? Like what? And if I get really honest, the reason is fear. And this exercise enabled me to identify what those fears were, and then to realize they're not that rational, and to start to decommission them.
Yeah, I mean, and I'd love to understand. Maybe we can get a little bit more to the difference between a true desire and then a false desire. So that's interesting, right? Because I think a lot of us are tied up. We all have desires, right? And I don't think a lot of us understand the difference, right? We don't understand the difference between a false desire and where that true motivation, where that vibration is actually, centered in versus a true desire. So, for your house to change or for you to be happy with your house,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
so if someone wants, to your point, so if someone wants $1 million, right? Let's just get back because it's so easy to talk about money. My desire is to have $1 million in the bank. So that is a false desire, right? Because it's not understanding, like, well, what do you want from that? Is it going to give you freedom? Is it going to give you peace of mind? Is it going to give you security? What is the true essence of why you want that money? You have to get to the true essence of why you want something, what that desire is, to understand if it's false or not.
Yeah,
Right?
so this is actually quite a hard piece of work, and it can take a bit of time to actually work it out. So I'm very glad you've raised it, and I'm glad you used the example of $1 million. So when you say I want $1 million, what you really want to feel is secure and to de-risk stuff to do with money and finances. So you really want to feel secure. So the real feeling is security and certainty around money, which comes down, well, what does the money mean? It means food and shelter and, retirement fund or whatever it might be. So
Status, right? A whole bunch of things.
yes, and there could be status as well. So, but then, okay, so let's say that your bank balance was zero today and tomorrow it's $1 million. Then pretty quickly, if the fears were there in the first place, they're going to pop up again. It's like, well, it's only $1 million. Like, that will give me a house or pay off my mortgage and the car loans. But what about my retirement fund? And what about a better house? And, what about the taxes? And what about this? And what about that? And suddenly it's like, oh, okay, $1 million didn't do it. What about 2 or 5? Would that do it? And then if you get to 5 or 10 million, as you or I know, that brings on a whole new set of fears and circumstances, including taxes, lawsuits, people wanting to get their hands on your money. Where the hell do I invest? Where do I invest it? All that sort of stuff. And it's like, yes, you might want it. And sure, having enough money is a preferable state to not having enough money to meet your monthly commitments and so on. But really what we want is that feeling of security. And if you start with that rather than the fear of the lack, so you can approach it from 2 angles. And this is a hard one, I have to say, for most people, that you can say, right, I don't have $1 million, I'm scared. And what do? I'll work hard and effort and struggle, hamster wheel, blah, blah. Or you can say, right, what I really want is the feeling of security. I can choose to feel secure in any moment, because in any moment, like right now, having an extra $1 million in the bank won't make any difference to you right now. The only possible difference is that feeling of feeling good. Well, if the only difference is feeling good, you can choose to have that feeling. Like, that's a choice. So you could actually pretend to have that feeling, and you've got that feeling anyway. So it's about the feeling, not the $1 million. But the point is that your current circumstance is a perfect reflection of your vibration, which is the collection of beliefs and attitudes and emotions and thoughts and blah, blah. And so your current circumstance is a perfect reflection of your vibration. And if you don't have the amount of money that you want, then there's something in your vibration, which is, because it's the perfect reflection, your reality is the perfect reflection of what you're all about, then you tweak some of those things within your vibration. You need to loosen up this and let some more of that flow and have less of that fear. And then because some people, everything seems to, what they touch turns to gold, everything, they just never seem to have any problems and it all flows beautifully. Well, that's because they got a very high vibration, and their reality is a perfect reflection of their high vibration. So instead of saying, well, the $1 million will make me feel better, it's like, well, I'll raise my vibration and I'll always have enough for whatever I need to do. And I also will practice that feeling good part of it. And then I will always feel good.
So this goes back, and I love how you gave the example of the $1 million where, and this is what people don't understand, right? So we're talking about inspiration, we're talking about fear, we're talking about urges. When you want $1 million, right? And this is a false desire. This is an urge. This is a desire to control conditions, because as you pointed out, you get the million and you're like, well, this isn't enough. I need two. Then you get two. You're like, this isn't enough. I need four. Well, this isn't enough because of all this. I need. So you're acting on a way to try to control all these outside conditions to make you have security, to make you feel good. And if you're not doing it's an inside job, if you're not doing that at home in the morning when you wake up, right when you wake up, those people that get $1 million are like, wow, this is amazing. This is fantastic. Cool. And then they're on with their life. The people that are still struggling, and there are so many of those limiting beliefs that are popping up, these urges, all these negative sort of feelings to control, no matter how much money they have. And that's why you see billionaires who are unhappy.
Right. So tell us that thing you've told us before about what Tony Robbins says about billionaires.
He says he told, right? Yeah, he coaches 48 of the top, I think, 50 wealthiest men or he coaches, yeah, whatever it is. And all of them, except for one, are depressed. And they're depressed with a significant
kind of proof in a way that the $1 million won't make you happy, right?
So right, but it's the wrong end. But they're all depressed. It's crazy because they're all depressed with one specific, I'm not worthy enough. I'm not worthy.
Right.
Right. And it's a depression. They're not satisfied. They're not fulfilled. And if you talk about alignment, you talk about inspiration, right? This is so important, I think, when you try to understand fear, urges, desires, inspiration, what you're going to push past. I want to push past, and I want to struggle and effort to make that $1 million. And you do, and you work hard, you get there, and then you get it, and then it's not enough. So all these guys who are amazing human beings, we give them all the credit in the world. They've pushed past, they've earned, they've created these giant businesses. They're miserable because they've struggled and efforted to make something they thought that would help them control their fear, control their environment. It doesn't. It's never enough. They're not fulfilled, not satisfied. You have to be satisfied and fulfilled in the moment, in the present moment, with nothing. Understanding that everything you need is there. And if you can take that moment.
With that $1 million thing, I was just thinking about lottery winners frequently, maybe mostly, end up back where they were or worse off than before, right? So they win up, so they have their vibration. Somehow they managed to attract this pile of money, but their vibration didn't change. And so pretty quickly, their reality reverts to how it was before, or they end up with a whole lot of fearful negative experiences and they actually descend lower. So I guess that is a small piece of evidence. It may not be a proof, but it's a piece of evidence that the $1 million won't change your life. And if you're not a vibrational match to it, it's not really going to help you at all. And the other
what about you've heard the story, right? I mean, they've done the analysis. They took all the money in the world and they put it into giant planes, and they flew the planes around the earth, like as many times as needed, and just threw the money out of the planes. Within 10 years, all the money would be back where it is right now.
Yeah, I believe that. I believe that. I know people say, rich people are getting richer and taking it from the poor and all the rest of it, but it's not actually how it works. I'm sad to say, but that's kind of victim thinking. So the other thing I want to say about wanting things to control conditions, if you ever look at the Reddit LOA subreddit, there's some very wise people in there, but there's a whole bunch of people who think that manifesting, as they call it, is right. I'm going to use this LOA kind of like a ninja mantra, and I'm going to manifest the boyfriend or girlfriend that I want, or the job that I want, or I want to manifest this amount of cash or this vehicle or whatever it might be. And it's like, oh, okay, that's the kind of, there's not even entry level LOA really. It's imagining that LOA is something you can turn on and off, that you're like, it's a law of the universe, like gravity, right? So it's like you are attracting whatever is in your vibration, what you're focused on, what you're thinking. So you can't turn it on and off. And people may or may not get that particular thing. And half the time they probably got it from efforting and struggling. But it's fascinating to me how many people never get past that point. They think, right, I know that if I get this money or this boyfriend or girlfriend or spouse or whatever, that I'll be happy. So therefore I'm going to use this ninja mind trick called LOA to attract it to me. Done and dusted, right, turn that off and get back to my normal life.
And it's a perfect segue. So now we take this inspiration, right? We've talked about all these different types of fears and inspiration, and now you apply it to manifesting, right? To mindful manifestation, right? And everybody believes that, to your point, I'm going to manifest a boyfriend, a girlfriend, money, a new job, a new whatever it is. And whatever that is it's kind of like, the genie in the lantern. It's just going to show up in your driveway. Like, well, that's not kind of how it works. So you literally launch that seed of desire. You throw that out there, and let's just say the idea is, I want to open up a brand new restaurant, right? And this is what I want to do. I want to become a chef, and I want to cook Italian meatballs and sausages all day, and sell them to people. And okay, that's great. And you get a hey, somebody says to you, hey, there's this new location. I don't know if you saw it down in downtown that's being offered. It's got a great deal, and you're like, oh, I should go take a look at it. Nah, I don't have the time. That's fear pops up. I'm not pushing past it. Well, hey, I make the time. Oh, let me go look at it. Well, the space isn't right. Space is terrible for you. But you meet somebody there and say, oh, you don't like this space? You got to see what I have going on over here. You're like, okay. What they don't realize is manifesting all that inspiration that you get to go here and go there. That is how we water the seeds of desire. It's a little scavenger hunt, right? I kind of love that analogy, where you have to kind of moving forward, pushing past that fear. I don't have to, and I mean fear, pushing past the excuses, because that's really what it is. It's the excuses. It's the stuff that gets you out of the comfort zone. And if you can listen to that inspiration, call a friend, send a text, go see a space, Google something, look it up. So to give you an example, I had to get all 4 tires on my big truck replaced. And I went to the place, and it was like $2,200. And I'm like, oh, okay. I'm like, I'd rather not spend $2,200 on tires. And then I'm down with my daughter's car. She had something wrong with it. And the guy goes to me, "Yeah, she probably needs a new tire. You should call Discount Tire." And I'm like, oh, okay. It's a place here in Arizona. I call him, and I give him the design of my car and everything on it. Oh yeah, we have that same tire. It costs less than $1,000. I'm like, all I did, I had an appointment with my place, and I was like, do I have to spend $2,200 on tires? I'm like, that's just like, whatever. That's stupid. And I saved $1,300 just listening to some random guy said to me, oh, you should look at Discount Tires for tires. They have the best tires on the planet, and they do it in 30 minutes. Wow. And I'm like, and I call them up, and literally the next day, like, oh, you want to come by tomorrow morning? And I'm like, I drive in, I'm on a call. I'm literally in the little space, come out. I'm like, that's inspiration. We don't give that any credit, right? We discount that. I got lucky. Wasn't that just strange? What a coincidence.
So, because inspiration can come from an outside source like that, like from the guy who recommended the tire shop. It can also come from that voice in your head. And one of the things is that people struggle to believe that, well, that's just a thought I had. That's not inspiration. And so it's like, no, that can't be inspiration. Like, the thing about inspiration, it tends to whisper, not shout as well. It's the fears that shout. I think that's another way to tell, is that, yeah.
They really do. And they make you take they don't make you. They invite you to take precedence, to have all those fears and those urges take precedence over the inspiration. But like the other day, when I think you were on the email, I sent an email to Gary and that team saying, hey, we need to do a retreat. I was meditating and just said, come to me like, well, you should do a retreat in Sedona. I mean, I was like, Rob would have such a blast doing like a Native American spiritual hike. I'm like, I would love that. Like learning about all the different elements. And it was just, and I just sent an email. I'm like, all right, we'll figure it out. And, but that kind of stuff, people are like, and they never take action on it. They never do anything with it. They're just like, oh, that was a cool idea. Well, if you could push past the excuse not to take action on it. And that's where people are like, I wasn't afraid not to do it. I just didn't want to do it. No, it's the excuse not to do it, right? That's where I think we misinterpret, because people are like, it's not like jumping out of an airplane. I wasn't afraid of it. Or like you said, I'm not jumping in front of a bus. Like, no, excuses are fear, right? That is it.
Yeah. Most of our reasons or excuses for not doing things are about fear and lack. That's true. Yeah.
Right. If we make that connection and we start to realize as we're sitting down and I'm talking to you and things are flowing, and in your head, there's a direction the conversation can go. You may try to control it and bring it this way, right? Let it flow. Just let it flow. Once you start to lean into that side of you, where those little ideas that pop in your head, you don't discard them. You actually take action on them. that's when things start to change. Like I was going to go to the gym this morning, and I got myself bag on my dog came and jumped on me. He was like, you know, he basically has his leash and he's like, let's go for a walk. And I'm like, I should probably take him for a walk, right? And I'm like, he needs a walk. I'm like, he's like, we're going for a walk. I'll do the gym later. Like, boom. I'm like, I could have controlled that and be like, I have a schedule. I have to meet my schedule.
Yeah, yeah. So that is a pretty good thing. Like I try to practice the idea that when somebody suggests something, for many people, and I've been like this as well, when somebody says, let's do such and such, the first response is often no, or why you can't do it. So another response is just to say yes to everything and see where you get to. And sure, you can back out of it later on if you decide it won't work for you. But instead of the answer being no, the answer can actually be yes. Do you want to talk briefly before we finish about something you mentioned right at the beginning, which was about traditional knowledge of, for example, indigenous people in your country or mine? Because I have some comments around that. So from what little I know of the beliefs of the Maori people of New Zealand, the indigenous people of New Zealand, that, for example, their tribal or what they call iwi boundaries are defined by a river, an awa, or a mountain or a hill, a maunga. And so those things are not just things in the physical world. Like when they introduce themselves in a traditional setting, there's a kind of a ritual introduction, which is I am this person and I am of this tribal grouping, then this is my identity, my mountain is this, my river is that. So this is part of their traditional introduction or greeting. And so to the Western person, like the Western business person, the river is something to be dammed for electricity, or it's to be, the gravel was to be taken out, you know, to make cement for buildings, or the mountain is to be quarried for stone. The sea, you know, is a place you can put treated sewage, you know, which is sacrilege to the indigenous people, because it's about the spirit of the thing. And so, you know, there's that concept in some of the work we've been doing that we are connected to everything and everything is us. So, and that applies to the physical universe as well as every other soul or spiritual person as well. So we've tended to look, we being, you know, white business people, for example, settlers, you know, or, you know, people who arrived and took over these countries, colonizers, we've tended to view these things as natural resources to be mined and used. But the traditional view of a Maori person is, well, no, that river is, I'll use the word sacred, but it's not quite the right word, but that river is sacred. No, it's not a river to be exploited and dammed and mined, and that's not a hill to be quarried. Like, these things are part of our identity. Like, we are them and they are us. And so there's a kind of an inherent conflict there, which is really, really interesting. And we've got this political idea that the current government wants to do this thing called three waters, which is basically drinking water, drainage, and sewage. And they want to kind of have a national approach to it, which in some ways is quite good because a lot of the cities are doing a very bad job managing it. Then the farmers have a very strong view. They're opposed to it because all the farmers and ranchers, they are seeing less access to irrigation, so they don't like it. But the Maori people in general like it because it will probably codify their values into the treatment of waters in New Zealand. So it's a fascinating thing, kind of, you know, the farmers and the business perspective on the one hand, and then the indigenous view on the other, ignoring the whole thing about government's ability or inability to manage assets. That's a whole other story. But it's very interesting to me because it's like, oh, I can see both sides of this and I don't really have a view. I probably in the past, I would have sided with the farmers, but more now I probably side with the uniqueness and the sanctity and the irreplaceability of these natural resources or assets. You know, the water in particular, like water when we were young was just, the idea of charging for water was unthinkable because it's everywhere like air, you know, whereas now we realize that water is such a key resource. And even in New Zealand, which is, you know, gets a lot of rain, like water, we're abundant in water, although with climate change some places are getting less. But we start to realize the value of it. We never did before. We took it for granted, but that's the economic value. So anyway, I just wanted to say that there's an essential clash there really between the traditional Maori view of water or a hill or a mountain versus the business view of Western settlers or colonists who just want to turn it into money.
Yeah, well, I think Dr. Wayne Dwyer writes about that in the Bible, right? When Moses asks, who should I tell the people that have given me these 10 commandments? And I guess the burning bush or God, the source, says, I am that I am. And there's been a lot of conversation over the years about what is that? I am that I am that it was there. Are we missing a comma? Was there something going on? Meaning, I am that the tree, I am that the mountain, I am that the ground, I am everything. We are all one, we're all connected. And if you really start to think about in America too, the Native American spirituality, the earth is absolutely part of us. It's absolutely part of who we are, part of our soul. And our connection to the earth is an energetic connection in a significant way. And bad energy can absolutely affect the earth, can affect crops, can affect rain. So there's no question that throughout time, the connection you're talking about has been discussed. And I do think that, just sort of like you said in the beginning, science wants to do away with that because they can't explain that this quantum field of energy that surrounds us, how powerful it really is, that we are all connected. You and I are, 10,000 miles away apart from each other, but we're energetically connected. We could do it via a Zoom call, via some texting, whatever it may be, but there's no question we're energetically connected. And I think the more you do that, the more you go outside and you take walks in nature. And it's that is another thing that's been scientifically proven. A walk in nature will lower your blood pressure, lower your heartbeat. I mean, so everything you're talking about, I just think over the years, we've just discarded it. Science has given us a reason not to believe in the things that you were talking about. And I'm looking for ways to get back to that knowledge. I'm looking for ways to learn more, to expand into that knowledge, to open up my vibrational signal, to accept more of that information, because it's fascinating to me. It's absolutely fascinating.
So this, we'll finish with this. We call this greenstone or ponomo. It's New Zealand jade from the South Island of New Zealand, and this is a kind of a traditional fishhook design, and it was given to me by my late sister-in-law. And so I was at an event when I was chairman of Alzheimer's Auckland, and this woman who was representing the local iwi, the Maori people, I met her. She's actually a Dame, which is like Sir so-and-so, like she's been, given this title by the Queen because she's a phenomenal leader. And she said, and we often refer to these with the Maori word for a treasure, which is a tawanga. And she said, I like your tawanga. It hasn't been blessed. And I said, no. And so she blessed it for me. And the rules with these things are, you can buy them in a shop, but the rules are you never buy one for yourself. It can only be given. And she said, okay, well, first of all, I need to know that this thing is suited to you. Is it a match to you? And so, she held it and closed her eyes and, And she said, yeah, okay, this thing is a match to you and it wants to be with you. And then she blessed it, which is kind of giving it some life force or some energy. And because it was given to me by dear departed sister-in-law, Eve, and because it's been blessed by this extraordinary woman who's an elder, of the Maori people and a leader, that's why I wear it all the time, because it carries so much meaning. And so it's interesting that you can buy them in the shop and give it to yourself, but that is a no-no. You don't do that. So we imbue, like people say, well, a load of poppycock, but it feels right, and I wear it, and energetically it feels really good.
I love that. That's a great way to end this conversation. I love that.
Yeah. So the island I live on so this is called in Maori, this stone, the jade is called Ponamu. And so the name for this island in Maori is Te Wai Ponamu, which means greenstone water. Yeah.
That's awesome.
This is where the greenstone, the Ponamu came from.
I love it.
And it was a treasure.
Awesome.
It was a treasure and also used for like edges and things. It's very, very hard. So they used it to make tools as well as using it for decoration. Yeah.
I love it. That's awesome.
Yeah. And on that note, so as
all
we
right, my
say
friend.
in Maori, we say haere rā, which means kind of go there, it's a goodbye. And we also say ka kite, which is see ya. Ka kite anō, see you again soon.
Ciao.
Ciao. Exactly. Ciao. Andiamo. Ciao.
You got it. See you, Rob.
See you, Jerry.